Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Saturday night, October 17th live stream for studentloanjustice.org. My name is Alan Collins. I hope everything is going well out there. It's actually snowing here in Wisconsin, so you know. And so it begins, the snow of winter. Anyways, I hope everything's going well for everybody out there. We have got 732,000, actually 733,000 signatures on the petition now, which is really good. But we have to do better. We are hoping to get up to 1 million signatures as quickly as possible. We might be able to make a 11th hour serious impact on this election. I'm not saying it all hinges on us getting 1 million signatures. I think we might get lucky anyhow, but it certainly wouldn't help, or it certainly would not hurt to have that magic million on our petition. So if you haven't signed, obviously sign. If you have signed, get two people that you know to sign. If your parents are still alive, maybe those would be two easy ones that you could get. Just tell them to do it. Just tell them. Anyways, that would help. If everybody did that, we'd be at 2.5 million signatures. So this is not hard stuff here, folks. This is just math, and the math is in our favor. If you know 5 people with student loans, 4 of them are losing sleep over those loans. So whether they tell you or not, that's just, again, math. So the numbers are definitely on our side, folks. So where are we at? Okay, this is where we are. First of all, if you're new to the group, welcome. We're glad that you found us. What took you so long? We are the oldest, largest, and really only citizens group actually fighting for student loan justice. For the first 15 years of our existence, we fought very moderately for the return of bankruptcy protections to student loans. However, now I have to say it is a catastrophically failed lending system, and the only solution that makes any sense at this point, particularly in view of the fact that we're throwing trillions of dollars around in fiscal stimulus, including probably what's going to end up being trillions of dollars in loans, business loans that don't need to be repaid. It turns out that the easiest, cheapest, and by far the best, most appropriate way to stimulate the economy right now is by canceling student loans by executive order. You know, the president can cancel these loans without needing to raise one dime in tax, without adding one penny to the national debt. And that's very important. So, yes, our petition is at 733,000 signatures. Do what you can to push it along. Where we are with the candidates is the following. We, many months ago, set our minimum criterion for what we would need to be able to endorse a candidate as minimally that candidate needs to pledge that as president, or in the case of President Trump, to actually do an executive order returning bankruptcy protections to student loans. Oh, and by the way, if you have any questions or comments, throw them out now. I'm very happy to respond in situ. Kind of think this is going to be a pretty short live stream. I'm going to keep it short and simple tonight, but I'm glad to extend if you have any comments or questions you'd like to throw out there. So our minimum requirement for endorsement is a pledge to return bankruptcy protections to student loans by executive order. Elizabeth Warren, for example, made that pledge. Bernie Sanders agreed to make that pledge, so he's essentially made it. One could even argue that Bernie Sanders went even further by pledging to cancel all student loans by executive order if necessary. So during the primaries, we could have endorsed Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. As it is now today, Joe Biden has not made that pledge. President Trump has not done that executive order. So we cannot at this time endorse either of those gentlemen. And that's unfortunate because we are pushing them very hard. And I hope that changes. You know, we've got, 2 weeks, a little more before the next election. And we have it within our grasp, within our within our own power to make that happen. With 733,000 signatures on the petition and 15 or 20,000 people in this group and many thousands more on our email list and so on and so forth, we have a big little muscle to flex now. I mean, I wish we had 5 or 10 million people, and we should. I don't know why we don't. It might have something to do with your not getting out there and networking, but whatever. 800,000 people is nothing to sneeze at. So, hey, Gordon Wayne Watts says correct on both Trump and Biden. Yeah, we're kind of close on Biden actually. His proposal sounds good, right? He goes, "Yeah, I'm for a return to bankruptcy of student loans, just like Elizabeth Warren is, and yeah, I want to cancel your loans. In fact, I want to eliminate your loans if you went to a public college and you earn less than $125,000 a year." He's saying that, but really, it's not believable, folks. You have to go to his website and actually read what they say on his website. He says he's for bankruptcy for student loans, that he's adopting Elizabeth Warren's agenda. But if you look at his website and read the actual words there, you will see that it's quite clear that he probably doesn't have any, he probably doesn't really have any plans to return bankruptcy protections to federal student loans, which are like 92% of all student loans. He just doesn't. You look at what he copied and pasted from Elizabeth Warren's website into his agenda, and it's all language about repealing what was done in 2005, undoing the 2005 thing, undo backpack, undo 2005. Well, the 2005 legislation only pertained to private student loans. And believe me, folks, we've been doing this for 15 years now. We can read between the lines. And if they don't say it, they're not going to do it. So Biden is not very serious on bankruptcy. And unfortunately, his loan cancellation plan sucks. He's not going to eliminate student loans for people who went to public college, earn less than $125,000. He's not. What he said back in April was that he was coming up with a plan to forgive a portion, like the tuition-related portion of undergraduates' student loans who went to public college. So that's a pretty small slice of the entire student loan pie, even for people who are households who earn less than $125,000. And by the way, he never followed through with that plan. He said he was ordering his team to come up with a plan back in April. Well, go to his website. Nowhere in that plan does that April 9th plan appear. And, even still, the press is reporting it like, yeah, Joe Biden's going to cancel your loans if you earn less than $125,000 a year. It's just wrong. It's not true. And I suspect the Biden campaign isn't really trying very hard to correct the record in the media. I don't think they're trying at all. In fact, well, I'm not going to ascribe any untoward motives to the good Joe Biden and his campaign, but you kind of really have to wonder what's going on there. So, yeah, folks, and President Trump, by the way, has nothing. I mean, he literally has nothing even worth talking about. So, Joe Biden's plan sucks at this moment. We cannot endorse. President Trump essentially has no plan. We cannot endorse. So, the two things that we're asking everyone to do tonight. Hey, Gordon Wayne Watts has another comment. We need to stay on both candidates for president and all lawmakers of both parties loudly and repeatedly. Sadly, even my candidate is weak here, and that other one, which one matters not, is even worse. Therefore, we need to ride them like a horse. Yeah, I agree, and I happen to know that Gordon lives in a Republican district, and Republicans are, I'm sorry to say, just far worse, far less inclined to help us, maybe until very recently, than are the Democrats. But, this is a conservative issue. Conservatives, there is nothing a conservative could like about this big government, predatory, college feeding, who the colleges indoctrinate our youth, in their words, not mine, their words. There's nothing that a conservative should like about this student loan program. You know, quite frankly, this lending system is catastrophically failed at this point. You know, the default rate for 2004 students is 40%. And those guys were only borrowing a third of what is being borrowed today. You know, the subprime home mortgage default rate, by comparison, was 20%. So people who are borrowing only a third of what people are borrowing today have a default rate of 40%. What do you think more recent borrowers are defaulting at? Is it 60%? Yeah. Is it 70%? Yeah, probably. 75, 80%? You know, that's about where we're at. In my best, most well-studied advice, if I had to guess, I would say, yeah, everybody walking around with student loans today, the default rate for everybody walking around is probably 80%, 75, 80%, maybe even more. I don't know. And, you know, even before the coronavirus, indeed, speaking of 80% of all federal student loan borrowers were either unable to make payments on their loans. And again, this is before the coronavirus, not now. Now it's like 90+%. But yeah, 80% unable to pay, or they were paying and their balance was going up. So, folks, by all reasonable, and we're reasonable people here at Student Loan Justice, by all reasonable metrics and measures, this is, there's no better word to call it than failed. And given an 80% default rate versus 20% for subprime home mortgages, I think it's fair to say that it's catastrophically failed. So almost nobody is paying on their loans right now. And I think it's time for people to get used to the idea that when and if they ever lift this payment suspension, quite frankly, they should just let it go on forever and just let the program die a quiet death or something. But if they ever do repeal this suspension and people have to start paying again, it's just not going to happen. This lending system is vanishing into a mist of illegitimacy as we speak. Now, that sounds like maybe a great thing if you have student loans and you hate them. But it could have a bad ending. It could have a good ending, could have a bad ending. I think the best ending is that the president, whether this one or the next, acknowledges this catastrophically failed lending system for what it is, and simply cancels the loans by executive order. We don't need Congress. We don't need to pass a law. This doesn't need to be paid for. We don't need to raise $2 trillion to cancel $2 trillion in loans. All that's nonsense. We don't need to raise taxes. We don't need to add one penny to the national debt. Simply cancel the loans. It's pretty simple. You know, we've been calling for that for over a year now, and I'm happy to say that 3 weeks ago, Elizabeth Warren and Chuck Schumer actually proposed a Senate resolution calling for exactly that. So good for us. It turns out that this little nothing group that we're sitting on right now, Student Loan Justice, little rickety volunteer grassroots group, turns out that we are leading the thought in the country on this. We were the lone voice in the wilderness for almost a year, and then finally Elizabeth Warren, Chuck Schumer came around, and others are coming around too. Now, whether this happens before the election or after, I don't know. But we want that good outcome, folks. We want these loans gone, not only for ourselves, but for the tens or hundreds of millions of people. They're going to follow in our footsteps. This lending system was never supposed to be an instrument for conquering and enslaving our best and brightest. That's just ridiculous. The Congress of 1965, Lyndon Baines Johnson, they all had expected that the loans they created way back in 1965 would be free of interest. So they never wanted this to happen. They're looking down, shaking their heads, I'm sure. As are the founding fathers, by the way. You know, this is this sort of predatory, monstrous, big government lending system is the last thing the founders wanted to see happen to the country. And that's what, by the way, why they called for uniform bankruptcy laws ahead of the power to declare war and raise an army. So we do not have to take this, folks. The founders are on our side. The Congress of 1965 surely is on our side. And I think whether they realize it or not, all the citizens of this country are on our side. They don't want this country to fail. And to beggar 44 million of your best and brightest is a sure way to make that happen. So, yeah. And we don't want the bad ending where there's no changes in the law and the student loan swamp, those monstrous little creatures that scurry in and around the Department of Education, have their way, and this becomes some sort of a dystopian police state where 55 million people are running from the law and having to change their names and flee to Mexico and commit suicide and become welfare people, whatever. No. We don't want that. We're a far better country than that. So we have to fight, though, folks, because that bad outcome, I hate to say it, but it's kind of a 50-50 at this point which way we go. And the people here on this group are the pioneers. Like Gordon, for example, he's a pioneer. He's been with us for quite a few years. Gordon himself has managed to get up on the Rush Limbaugh show live. He's gotten in on C-SPAN, and he can tell you better than I can all the different radio shows that he, as an army of one, has managed to get through in fighting for our cause, fighting for student loan justice. And this is stuff that everybody and anybody can and should be doing. So you'll notice at the top of this post, or maybe off to the side, there are two things we're asking everybody to do right now. And that is to both contact the Biden and Trump campaigns and tell them to meet our minimum threshold so that we can endorse them. In other words, pledge, in the case of Biden, to return bankruptcy protections to student loans by executive order. Or in the case of President Trump, actually issue an executive order returning bankruptcy protections to student loans. Now, I know nobody wants to file for bankruptcy. And again, to those of you who are new, I know I talk about bankruptcy a lot and everybody's like, bankruptcy? I don't want to file for bankruptcy. Yeah, we get that. Nobody wants to file for bankruptcy. It's a terrible thing to have to do. But the Founding Fathers felt so strongly that it should be there. They called for it in the Constitution, uniform bankruptcy laws, ahead of the power to declare war, ahead of the power to raise an army in the Constitution itself. Not the Bill of Rights, the actual Constitution. So nobody wants to file for bankruptcy, but we've got to have that power back on our side as it exists for every other type of loan in this country. Like, this is the low bar, the low-hanging fruit. It's our minimum threshold for what we need to see to endorse a candidate. So President Trump needs to do it. Joe Biden needs to pledge to do it. Write to both of their campaigns and say that. And we gave you a script that you can copy and paste. And, normally I would say use your own words and stuff like that. And we're asking you to tweet it to them too. And those two things are crafted perfectly so that they fit exactly into a Twitter box. So they're exactly the right length. So please do that. And then if you want to send them another thing and spill your guts and use your own personal powers of persuasion with your own personal story, etc., to convince them, do that. But at least on the first go around, copying and pasting that script would be good, because it's like poetry, Twitter, You can only get so much out. And it is precise, too. It's got to be legally precise, and that it also is. So I would urge you to do that. Hey, Trump, Gordon says, Trump has done a few weak things for us that vets red tape bill, but vetoed the fraud cancellation bill. Biden has a history of supporting oppressive bills. Scott Franklin, the GOP candidate who beat Ross Spano, our sitting incumbent in Florida, by the way, is good friends with Matt Gaetz, who endorsed Franklin over Spano. Hope to use that to persuade Franklin, and you should too. Yeah, by the way, if you guys live in Florida, Matt Gaetz is a Republican congressman. Pretty popular guy, actually. He gets followed around by Vice News or HBO or something like that these days. Seems like a pretty good guy, young guy, nice guy. He's one of the few Republicans in the Congress who's actually championing our bill, H.R. 2648. So if you live in Florida, or maybe if you don't, you might want to give Matt Gaetz, Gaetz, a call, send him a little message, and just hook up with him on Facebook. Thank him for what he's doing and ask him to do everything he can to convince President Trump to return bankruptcy to student loans by executive order or to actually cancel these stupid loans. There's no better thing that President Trump can do right now to pull this election, in my humble opinion, out of his ass. Pardon my French. President Trump's going to have a hard time, I think. The polls, maybe they do lie, but it doesn't look good for Trump. And the main thing to remember is that Joe Biden, although his loan cancellation and bankruptcy plan suck right now, they sound pretty good. And so if the average guy who doesn't know anything but has student loans, like the 44 million people in the country who do, looks at a side-by-side comparison between Biden and Trump, Biden stands out really strongly over Trump. So that's enough voters to turn a landslide into a loss and vice versa. So Trump really needs to do something. So if you're Republican, you may want to emphasize the contacting the Trump thing rather than the Biden thing. But I leave it up to you. So Gordon also says Lucy Bartow, Modesto, California, listens to Coast. And by the way, we appear on Coast to Coast quite frequently. Coast to Coast radio. Asked if I could sell her guest column submission to radio. Yeah, I don't know what that means, Gordon. Maybe sounds good, but we don't like to pay people money to get in the media. We don't do that. We don't have any money. Speaking of which, if you could donate at this time, it would be very helpful. We survive and thrive only on donations from very generous and inspired individuals like you out there in the country. We don't do deals with bad guys. We will never sell our members out. We are not actually trying to sell you anything. We don't play little back scratch games with deep, dark, shadowy people like pretty much every other group out there that I've seen. We don't have some weird little con that we're trying to get you to sign on to like rehabilitate your loans or reconsolidate your loans or any nonsense like that. We survive and thrive only from nickel and dime donations from people like you. And that's the way it's always been and the way it will always be with this group. And I hope that you can appreciate that fact. So by all means, go to the website, studentloanjustice.org/support. That helps a lot. So, yeah, folks, I think I've said what I came here to say. The petition is key. Number one key is doing those two things, contacting Biden and Trump. Look up, look over there, self-explanatory. Second thing is doing everything we can to push that petition. We really wanted to get it up to 1 million signatures. Like, by tomorrow would be perfect. So, like, if everybody added even one person, but I would say 2 people, and I would say if your parents are alive, your parents. Like, what could be easier, right? Just dad, mom, just sign this. You don't have to read it, just sign it. Do that. And that will help us tremendously. But make that happen, because the one thing that we have learned over these many years of fighting is that when you there sitting there, you, right there, I see you. When you guys do nothing, nothing happens. These are your loans. This is your livelihood at stake. This is your problem. And we have never, as a group, been closer to actually solving this problem than we are here today. We could theoretically get this problem done by election day, or maybe by January 20th. So think about that. Right now we are in that critical spot in this election where we could win everything. Or we might be stuck for 4 more years with another status quo Joe president. And we don't want that second thing. So please have at it, folks. And Ryan Salek says, this is the only group. Ryan, I wish I could disagree with you. If there was another legitimate group out there that was actually fighting for student loan justice, I would throw this banner behind me in a museum, and I would join that group, because this is kind of a pain in the ass. But unfortunately, that group does not exist. All the other groups out there claiming to be fighting for student loan borrowers, they are not fighting for us. They don't want to solve this problem because then they would be out of a job. So this isn't my job. I mean, I guess this is my job, but I hate this. I would much rather be doing other things. I've got other things that I'd like to be doing than this battle. And so that's the big and we don't have a Washington, D.C. office that we need to pay. We don't have a staff that we need to pay. We don't have a organization that we're looking to build. We're not trying to enhance our professional careers, reputations, none of that nonsense. All the other groups are fakes. Like even this, anyways, I don't want to get started on that. It just makes my blood boil. Some of the groups out there are even worse than fake. Some of the groups out there are fighting for private lending interests, I will just say. There's a term called astroturf with regards to advocacy, and I urge you to Google that term, and that tells the tale for one, if not two, or maybe even more groups out on the internet and out in the country who claim to be fighting for student loan borrowers. Don't believe them, guys. Don't believe them. This is the group, as Ryan said, right here. So, okay, folks. Well, I'm going to leave it there at that. It's Saturday night. I said I'd keep this short, and I'm not sure if I held to that or not. Time sort of flies when you're doing these live streams. But anyways, hope everybody takes what I said to heart. We are in the best position we've ever been in. Please donate if you can. Tell 5 or 10 or 100 people about this group. Let's get this problem solved sooner rather than later, shall we?